Hey, you're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include self-checkout, independence, and the end times.
Wrong! What's wrong with you? What's wrong with y'all?
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you people? Wrong!
You do have to tolerate it. It's my show.
I am Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1. Check me out. You may have noticed that there are more and more self-checkout options at your store, at fast food restaurants. You know, you go into McDonald's and it's much easier, at least where I live, to click on their little self cashier thing. You know, it's like a giant phone. It's hard to find somebody actually working the counter who can use the cash register. Sometimes it's the same guy who's working the drive-through. And people don't necessarily like this. You know, you go to the grocery store and what's this? I've got to ring all this up myself? Like, no, I'm going to have them do it. Not me. I like it. I prefer it in many ways, especially if I've got like, you know, express aisle kind of stuff. Like I've got just a few items and I just want to run in, run out. I don't want to wait in the long line with somebody who's doing their weekly grocery shopping. But a lot of people don't like it and refuse to use it. And let me tell you that you are in a long line of people refusing to change how they shop. And eventually you will change. And you don't have a long enough history of what stores are like. You know, if you go to a third world country and you go to the market, you've got to go to a different stall for your meat, a different stall for your rice, and a different stall for your fish, and a different one for vegetables. And if you want to buy shoes or toiletries, there's a different vendor that you can go to for each of those. You're shopping at basically a different store for each of those items. In Western countries, we have changed all that. And instead of a market with a bunch of different vendors, we go to a market that's owned by one company, and they sell all the stuff. And they've been able to reduce prices and increase, selection because they've got purchasing power that a local vendor just doesn't have. And we like this. We like being able to choose all these different things. We like that the prices have come down. That's why supermarkets have become what they are. Same thing at department stores where you buy your clothes. You might, instead of going to one store for men's clothes and another for the kids' clothes, it's all right there. And when you think about a department store, which, RAP, they're all dying. We loved you, Macy's, when you existed. Dillard's, we knew you well. When you go into one of those stores, if you happen to go into one now, you will see a remnant of the way department stores used to be. And that is in the perfume and jewelry section. You go into the store, you've got free reign, You've got free reign, REIGN, over the whole store. You can, pick up any product you want, but the perfume and jewelry, that's expensive. And they are worried that you might shoplift. And so they have special little islands right there, and there's a salesperson there to help you with those things. It used to be that the department store was entirely like that you would walk into one of these stores and you would have to go to a different counter for each thing. And you wouldn't ring up at the end. You would ring up right then and there. You want to buy those shoes for your son? Great. Pay for them right now. You walk a few feet over and you're shopping for, men's pants. Okay, great. Here's your pants. You pay for them right here and now. You can't just pay for everything all at once. And when you watch old Westerns and somebody goes into a store and they need something, think about what the store was like in your mind. There was a counter, and behind the counter there was a man, usually wearing an apron, and he's got some stuff in front of him, but most of the products are actually behind him. And you would tell him what you would want, and he would pull it off the shelf for you and wrap it up. This is the way stores used to be. But slowly they changed, and they let you pick out the stuff yourself and then take it to a cash register at the end. This is what you are familiar with now. But when this change was happening, people didn't necessarily like it. They're like, what are you making me do all the work for? Why am I running around this store picking up all this stuff? Somebody else should have to go pick it up for me. I don't like it. I want to go to the old store the way it used to be. And over time, the store, they all changed this into this model that you're familiar with because people actually preferred it. They liked it better. It was quicker. You didn't have to wait as long for other people to get their shopping done because you weren't waiting for one person if there happened to be, not enough people working or too many people shopping. And when they made this change, it increased shoplifting. Shoplifting, like the way it used to be, like I said, with the perfume and the jewelry still today the way it is, it's because they're worried about people stealing stuff. And so those high-priced items have not evolved the way everything else has. In the stores, they've accepted this compromise. Hey, it'll be a lot more convenient for people, and we'll have to pay fewer people to work in the store. And the cost-benefit exchange is that more stuff will be stolen, unfortunately. But over the long haul, we're going to make up the difference by employing fewer people and by making it a place people want to shop because they can do it quicker. So same with all the self-checkout stuff. You don't necessarily, I don't know why we think we need somebody to run the thing over the scanner for us. That's not really a skilled position. When you've got produce and you don't know all the numbers and codes, I totally get it. But, if you've just got a bottle of shampoo and you're at Target, then by all means, just here, I'll scan it. Here's the money. Let me run. And you're going to see more and more of this. And this is not a justification for you to shoplift. I've been listening to another podcaster, Jonah Goldberg, and he frequently says, an explanation is not a justification. And I think that's a great turn of phrase. Just because you know that they're going to accept more shoplifting because of this new convenience and fewer workers, that doesn't give you the right to, that doesn't justify you shoplifting. Issue number 2, Temple Lot. Okay, for the second week in a row, I have talked about something, and then as I'm publishing the episode, something happens that would have been great to include. And this time, it's about the LDS Church and their ban on black members holding the priesthood in the past. And while I was publishing it, a man named Brad Wilcox, I can't quickly explain his leadership position to you, but let's just say out of 5 million Mormons, 5 million Latter-day Saints in the world, he is in the top 100 of leadership positions. Okay, so he's giving this speech to some youth in Utah, and he had this to say about the priesthood ban.
Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe instead of saying, why did the blacks have to wait until 1978? Maybe what we should be asking is, why did the whites and other races have to wait until 1829?
And I'm just going to leave that without comment. But that does lead me to say that this podcast is not intended to be a podcast about Mormonism or the LDS Church. But 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to talk about the LDS Church, and you'll come to understand why later. It's just like the movie Pig. It might be confusing for a little bit, but just wait. The answer will become clear soon. Okay, so this week, I want to talk about the LDS view of the end times. And what you don't know about it, or you may not know, or you may know about it, but not understand, is that the LDS Church has a very clear and firm view that when Jesus returns in the second coming, he will return to Independence, Missouri. And that's probably like, wait, what? And the Bible describes this temple will come down from the sky. The book of Revelation specifically this temple will come down from the sky, and it will be in the earth, and it will be the new Jerusalem. And the LDS believe that to be true, and they know that the location of this new temple, this new Jerusalem, will be Independence, Missouri. And you're probably like, wait, what? Why Independence, Missouri? Well, Joseph Smith, he had to move the church a number of times because of persecution or because things weren't going well. And he had sent out some people to start developing a new LDS community in a place he called Far West, Missouri. And at the time, this was way out there. This was the wild, wild west. This is kind of like sending people to go live on the moon for us today. So he's in Illinois. He's got people in Missouri, and things don't go well in Illinois, and that's a subject for a different day. And you know what? I made a mistake.
Wrong!
He wasn't in Carthage, Illinois when he went to Missouri. He was actually in Kirtland, Ohio. Anyways, so he makes a run for it and joins everybody in Far West, Missouri. And in this place, this is now Jackson County, Missouri. He says that this is actually the location of the Garden of Eden. And he pinpoints a valley, and he says, this is called Adam Ondi Amen, and this is the place where the Garden of Eden was. In addition, while he's there, he makes a prophecy that Jesus will return to this place, and that there will be a temple there. The LDS will actually build a temple, and this temple will be the place Jesus returns to. Well, things don't necessarily go well in Missouri. In fact, things go some of the worst that's ever happened in Mormon history happens in Missouri. Some people leave the church, and then the LDS who remain, they start harassing these ex-Mormons, these former members of the church, and that harassment gets the local law enforcement involved, and other people get really upset about what the LDS are doing to their ex-members, and persecution of the LDS begins. And a number of people die. They're murdered. They're flat out murdered. That's how bad it got. And the governor of Missouri signs an execution order against the LDS. He says they all need to leave. And so they do. They go back east. They cross the Mississippi River and go back to Illinois. And they build a new city there. But on their way out, Joseph remembers that he's made this prophecy that a temple will be built in this place. And so, in the cover of dark, he and some other people, they go to this temple lot that he's designated, and they plant a cornerstone for the future temple that will be built there. And then they make a run for it. They go to Nauvoo. So, eventually, Joseph Smith dies. He's murdered by a mob, and there is this secession crisis in the church. And again, maybe I'll talk about that later, but not right now. Can't talk about it. But there's a number of different divisions that come out of the death of Joseph Smith. The church breaks up in a number of different ways. And every single one of those factions, those new branches of the church, they also have their own divisions. They either die or they're divided themselves. And what you think of as the Mormon Church is based in Salt Lake City. But that's only just the largest and most popular and wealthiest of all of these churches. There's over 100 different LDS churches that come out of the teachings of Joseph Smith. And what's funny about that is if you ever meet with LDS missionaries, they'll say, hey, there's just one true church. And look at all the divisions in Protestantism. Look, you can't say you're worshiping the true Christianity because look at all these different churches that have broken up and all these divisions over silly things. And they're right. There are a lot of churches that have divided over silly things. No argument there. But the thing is, it's true of Mormonism as well. It's true of every LDS faction and division in church. They've also broken up over silly things. Well, one of these divisions, they make their way back to Missouri. And in 1863, they buy the property where Joseph Smith had planted this cornerstone, this temple lot. And they set up shop there. They build a new church. They set up their headquarters in this place. And they start making plans to build a temple. And this church is called the Church of Christ Temple Lot. And you can visit it today. I've been there. And when you go, there's like a couple of times a day where you can show up, and their chief evangelist will sit down and he'll talk to you about the history of the church and what they're doing and what their beliefs are. And he was a little bit confused by me because I had no Mormon background, and he's very used to talking to people of one faction of Mormonism or another. But this church, it's a small church, but they actually have like 7,000 members in 11 different countries. It's much bigger than you would think when you visit the church. It's just the one church is their headquarters, and it's kind of a small country church. And he was a very nice man, and this church differs than what you know of as the LDS Church in that they reject many of the scriptures that the other LDS follow. They only use the King James Version of the Bible and the Book of Mormon. They're actually Trinitarian, and many people don't know that the LDS Church was Trinitarian until basically Brigham Young took over. Joseph Smith started to teach some things that were later adopted as a rejection of the Trinity, but for most of Joseph's life, he was a Trinitarian, like other Christians are. And this church kind of holds to what Joseph taught right up until the point where he moved to Illinois and started practicing polygamy. You know, they kind of just cut off the last 3 years of his life and follow his teachings from that point forward. So this lot is referred to as the place. Every LDS faction in the world believes that this is the place that Jesus will return. And so they've all got this investment in Independence, Missouri. And across the street, I believe it's to the east of the Church of Christ Temple Lot, the Community of Christ has built a giant, gorgeous temple. And the Community of Christ is the second largest of these denominations. And they've had many reforms over the last 20 or 30 years. Really, you would, theologically, you could think of them as a liberal Methodist denomination. That's a pretty close approximation of what they believe. But they've got this beautiful temple. It's right across the street from the temple lot. And to the north of the temple lot is another division of the church. I believe it's called the Reformed Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then across the street on the southern side is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Visitor Center. This is the Salt Lake City-based version of the church. And they're all just kind of waiting, hoping that someday that this Church of Christ Temple Lot will fold and go bankrupt, and then one of them can buy up the lot for themselves. Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@thewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, thewrongpodcast.com. And help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. I was wrong.
Listener Matt writes in and says, referring to episode 55, "This week's podcast episode is so good. Dang it, I am mad at you. Now I have yet another thing I must listen to each week." Thanks, Matt, and no apologies. Issue number 3, Mark of the Beast. There's this article, I'll try to find it and put it in the show notes. It's about how in communist China there's this rising belief among the Chinese about UFOs and alien intervention. And I noticed this and thought, this seems familiar to me in a different way. I'm not actually surprised. And that is because, it's a country without civil rights. It's hard to live there. And if you have if you want out of it, you need hope in something. And there is this trope in literature and in movies called Deus ex machina. And it's this idea that sometimes you'll be watching a movie and some character or something that nobody has mentioned before all of a sudden comes in and saves the day. It's this thing that comes from outside the box, basically. The filmmaker, the story, whoever's telling the story has built this elaborate box telling you what the world is like. And then when things get really bad, boop, they bring in something that hadn't occurred to you was even possible. And it changes the story. Probably the easiest example I can come up with is in Lord of the Rings. Sam and Frodo have destroyed the ring and the volcano's erupting and they're gonna die and they have no way home. They're exhausted. And all of a sudden, giant eagles come and pick them up and fly them out. And everybody always says, why didn't they just use the eagles to go to the volcano in the first place? Because nobody introduced the eagles, beforehand. And that's not true. I know you ringers are like, yes, he did mention the eagles and he couldn't use the eagles because of this and the Nazgul and all that. Anyway, that's not the point of this story right now. Later, we'll have that big debate. Anyway, just to make an example of how this device works in movies and storytelling. And I think that this idea that UFOs can save the day for Chinese living under the communist government is not all that different from something I see among evangelical Christians. And that is, that's it. Jesus is coming soon. He must be coming soon. There's no other way out of this situation for us culturally, other than that the end times are now upon us. And I specifically notice this every time a Democrat wins the presidency. It's like, all right, we've lost the culture now. The only way out is for Jesus to come back. And in fact, this Democratic president, he must be the Antichrist. And I will confess something to you right now. I'm old enough now, and I've seen this enough times that it's really developed cynicism in me. And I recognize that my cynicism can lead to sin. And I was challenged by an ex-Jehovah's Witness general authority. I read his book. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are really devoted to end times teachings, really consumed with the apocalypse. And he said, we should never discourage anyone from being hopeful or excited about the return of Christ. And he is absolutely right. I need to hold that intention with everything else I'm about to say. But I want to say but I know I should say and. I'm just going to go ahead and say but. But some of the things people believe are signs of the ends of the times. I'm like, what? Come on. No, that's not it. And, when you mention the mark of the beast now, with coronavirus and the vaccines, everybody's like, oh, yeah. The vaccine's the mark of the beast. I've heard that one. And, the microchips inside. And no, that's not what I'm talking about right now. I think that's too easy. But anytime a mandate of any sort is conceived of, many Christians think, oh, this must be the mark of the beast. Because when they hear mandate, the only mandate the Bible talks about, aside from the mandate to love one another, is if the government's forcing something on us, it must be because the Antichrist has something to do with it. The big one I hear right now is that a cashless society is a sign of the end times, that this cashless society is the mark of the beast. Using credit cards is, or having numbers in our, on our tattooed on our arms, or using our irises or something, that's the mark of the beast. And I heard the same thing when George Bush, the first President George Bush, signed NAFTA, the North American Fair Trade Agreement. Oh, he didn't sign it. Bill Clinton did. Democratic president. See? And, hey, this NAFTA, this free trade agreement, this is going to lead to the end times because it's one world government now. There are no borders, and we must oppose it for those reasons. And I'm like, why should we, whether it's cashless society or free trade, I'm like, why would we oppose this if this is how Jesus is going to come back, like, shouldn't we embrace it? Like, this isn't immoral in itself, right? Like, it's not actually immoral to use a credit card. It's not immoral to not charge a tariff on Mexican goods. Like, hey, if this is it, if you're right, then great, let's rejoice. Jesus is coming. Let's bring it in. More NAFTA, more free trade. By all means, I want Jesus to come back. I don't need to oppose it just because someone evil is going to misuse it, because I know that what the end of the game is. Like, yeah, the Antichrist is gonna misuse it, but then Jesus comes back and he's gonna fix it all. And soon, let's have it. And the general attitude I see in this is that people are more afraid of the Antichrist than they are excited about Jesus. And, this is particularly weird if you believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, which I don't. That's another subject for another day. But if you believe that all Christians are going to be raptured before the Antichrist takes over, then you've got nothing to worry about. Like, bring it. Like, yes, I want to give him the keys to the world because I'm going up to see Jesus soon and I'm avoiding all of the persecution. Weird to me. I have cognitive dissonance over some of these things. The other thing I want to say is my understanding of the mark of the beast is that it is a willful rejection of Jesus. And I do not believe that any true believer, any true Christian believer, can be tricked into accidentally denying Jesus Christ. Like, and if you are accidentally tricked into it, I don't think Jesus is going to hold that against you. Oops, you're foolish. Oops, somebody pulled a magic trick over you and you said no to me. No, that's not how Jesus works. That's not how your faith in Jesus works. Like, the mark of the beast is a will, like, you're willfully worshiping the Antichrist as the true savior of the world rather than Jesus. You're not going to be duped into that. You're going to know what it is. It's not going to be hidden from you. So let me just read some Bible to you, okay? To make my point. So the mark of the beast, it comes from Revelation 13, verses 15 through 18. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. So this idea that you can't buy or sell. I've had a brief conversation with somebody about this, and she's like, yes, it's clear it has to be cashless because you can't buy or sell without the mark. And how else could the Antichrist do this unless there's no cash? He couldn't actually prevent you from buying anything if there's cash around, right? And I like, yeah, okay, maybe this is the way, but it doesn't say, the Bible doesn't say it's cashless. You're speculating that that's the device the beast will use. It doesn't actually explicitly say because there's no money in the world. If there's no money, you could still bargain and barter and you could trade things with other people. You could still find a way to get food and toilet paper, even without money. So it's not like we need cash to get the things we need to conduct trade. And this was written to a first century people. And, it was written first and foremost to them, people in the first century. They didn't have credit cards. They couldn't conceive of ways that, well, maybe it would be easier for them to buy and sell things without cash because, bartering was probably more popular then. But anyways, like, just we might have more knowledge, and someday when Jesus returns, we will have more knowledge than those first century Christians. But this kind of has to make sense for them too, as it was written to them. And at the time, they were all using coins that were produced by Rome. And on this coin was the head of Caesar, specifically Nero. And his name was on these coins. And it said Caesar Nero. And if you took the Hebrew letters and you applied like if I took the letter A and said this is 1, and B is 2, and C is 3, took the Hebrew alphabet and did that sort of thing. You took the letters for what's on their money, they couldn't buy or sell without it, Caesar Nero, and you applied numbers to it, and you calculated, let the reader calculate, let the person who has insight calculate the number, for it is the number of a man. Those numbers add up to 666. Now, this is clearly, to me at least, a swipe at Nero. Like, John is saying, the world is against us. The world hates us, and Nero specifically is a monster. And that doesn't mean necessarily that the mark of the beast has been fulfilled. It's a sign of the times to come, too. But the readers at the time would have known, oh, this was a subtle way of hiding this way of denouncing Caesar. What I think is actually more important than figuring out what the mark of the beast is actually also found in Revelation 13. And I'm going to back up a few verses here. Let's go back. So I just read verses 15 through 18. I want to back up and go to verses 8 through 10. It says this: all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed, with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. So this raises the question to me. Revelation is saying, hey, you can't reverse this. You can't stop this. If you're going to be led into captivity, you will be. And if you're going to be killed, you will be. So where should our focus be? What's a more fruitful effort on our part? Is it to figure out what the mark of the beast is? Or is it to develop patient endurance? What's going to help us more in our life or at the end of times if we're facing the tribulation? Is it to have this foreknowledge and of what the mark of the beast is? Or is it to have the kind of character and discipleship that produces patient endurance? But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know. And let me know why. I had fun and I hope you did too. Bye-bye.